Thanks everybody for coming out to my talk today. I'm going to ask really quickly if people can move forward a little bit because I want to have a couple of questions and interactive bits of the talk. So if you're comfortable moving forward, come on up. So I'm from Canada. I previously worked at a small company that was bought by Symantec doing antivirus analysis. Moved on to Microsoft where I was on the Security Response Center team, published 7 security bulletins, rebooted your computers a couple of times, sorry about that. Back in 2012, and then I moved on to a security engineering team at Microsoft called the Security Engineering Center, where we were responsible for implementing the Microsoft security development lifecycle. And this January, I moved down from Seattle to San Francisco, and now I work at Heroku, a Salesforce company. Who here knew that Heroku was part of Salesforce? That's actually a pretty good percentage, like relatively speaking. But I'm going to talk a fair bit about Salesforce, how Salesforce works, and how Salesforce works with Heroku, so I wanted to make sure everybody knew that. There's a couple of like astonished looks in the room. In the Valley, we talk a lot about moving fast and breaking things. Security is often thought of as something that gets in the way of that, but being able to do that safely, I don't know if anybody remembers when this happened. Mark Zuckerberg, a security researcher had reported a vulnerability to Facebook through their bounty program, and they had turned down the bug. They said, this isn't a bug, we can't reproduce it. So the researcher who had reported it was pretty frustrated, and he used the bug to go and post on Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook wall, thereby proving that the bug was actually a thing. That happened about 2 years ago, I think. So I want to talk about some red flags and green flags in terms of how security organizations work with engineering organizations and with leadership. Some of the big ones that I've seen in the past in previous organizations, from talking with friends and colleagues in the industry, some of the patterns that have emerged are pretty consistent across people who do security and work with engineering organizations in our industry. One of the big ones is blameful interactions between security and engineering. You have your red team or an external security firm come in and do an audit, and when you get into the room to hear the final report, man, you guys, this was terrible. Like, there's all these bugs everywhere. What were you thinking? This is like some 101 OWASP top 10 kind of stuff. I'm disappointed. That kind of interaction is, in my experience, has been really symptomatic of security people feeling unheard and engineering teams feeling like they're getting picked on. Nobody likes having their baby called ugly, and a lot of the time that's the attitude that security people unfortunately bring with us. Where a lot of that comes from is a disconnect between the understanding of the security bugs that a pen test team, a red team, or external security researchers are bringing to an organization. And the knock-on thing from that disconnect is often a long lag time between the bug getting discovered and the bug getting fixed. And then the final red flag that I've seen is a long lag, a long disconnect between those engineering changes being made and follow through, where those engineering lessons get taken into policy, get incorporated into your security lifecycle. So that you're not going to make the same mistake the next time you develop a new product, the next time you ship code. So some green flags, some positive things that I've seen in healthy security cultures, organizations that are doing a good job of having that interaction between the engineering team and the security team. Developers who are proactively reaching out to the security team when they're stuck on an issue, when they're trying to repro a bug, when they're unsure about how to fix something going forward, or when they're working on a new design and soliciting active feedback in terms of like, hey, how do I do the right thing in handling this user input and handling this data? When there's peer-to-peer security bug finding, we have one developer at Heroku who is legendary. For anybody ships code internally, he will immediately go and find cross-site scripting or whatever in it, like before it's even public, and just sort of, it's like his hobby. Internally, he's not on the security team, though I sometimes wonder if we should bring him on board. And a culture where people are okay stepping up and saying, hey, I accidentally pasted this credential into HipChat or whatever. I've already rolled it, like I already changed the password, but I just wanted to let you know that happened, just to make sure like everything's okay. We checked all the T's and dotted the I's. So how do you get from that blameful culture, the adversarial relationship with the security team, to that green culture, that trusting relationship where the security team and the engineering team are collaborating to make your products better? It's kind of cheesy, but I was biking to work a couple of days ago, and I was like, what does trust actually mean? What does that mean to have internally within an organization? And I think that there's two really important components of it as it applies to a security team. The first one being transparency. As an organization, you've got a lot of flat organizations in this area. Not everybody has, all of the developers have access to all of the code, but being able to have the security team get access to all of your code, to your mailing lists that are company readable, you're in the panopticon. You're able to have that transparency in terms of your processes, your code base, that kind of thing. And that transparency goes both ways. It's really important that the security team also be transparent in what their expectations are of the engineering team. So you have things like security policies. What's the impetus behind the security policy? Why do we require this particular check, this particular tool to be run? And what are the actionable items out of those policies? I have to check this checklist to be PCI compliant or whatever, but what's the reasoning behind those checks? And being able to show developers the justification for why you're asking them to do something, rather than just say you have to be OWASP top 10, don't do OWASP top 10 bugs, right? What is the actual action that a developer can take to do the right thing there? And then on the other side, you have accountability, and that accountability has to go both ways between the teams. You have the expectations that the developers are going to follow up on the security bugs that you've reported to them and respect the prioritization that you've set of those security bugs. But also the other way around, the development team has to be able to trust that the security team is going to follow up on changes to process, is going to iterate on their secure development lifecycle, all of these things. And with those, you get trust. If you're doing those things, you have the accountability. This is from Wikipedia, isn't it hilarious? I have this running joke with my team, because the security organization at Salesforce goes up under the trust organization. And at any of our offsites and stuff, I'm like, as long as there's no trust falls, please tell me there's no trust falls. So I feel like it was very important that I shared that hilarity. That trust comes from being willing to perform the emotional labor as a security person and as an engineer of following through on your commitments to the rest of the organization. As a security team, that emotional labor comes from being careful in communicating your frustration with a particular piece of code in a non-blamey way. Being able to say, hey, we need to work on this we've seen a bunch of this class of bugs. Let's figure out what the root cause of having this bug over and over again is and tackle that. And as a development team, the emotional labor that you're performing is being able to take that criticism. It's being able to say, okay, yeah, we're gonna, we didn't, we made some mistakes in this piece of code. We're gonna keep an eye out further on that and being willing to be receptive to that criticism. One of the things that often I've seen be sort of a piece of friction between security teams and engineering is that the security team is often in a position of being expected to impact and influence, Microsoft speak, or have responsibility without power, without authority. And when you see big breach situations, I think Target was the big exception where the CEO did actually step down. That almost never happens. In a breach scenario, it's almost always the CISO who gets canned or steps down, spend more time with their family, that kind of thing. So I think that's remembering that that's often the situation that a security team is in is important for having that trusting relationship. And on the other side, the big thing that security teams can do better, who's familiar with the Hacker School social rules? Anybody? Okay, you have to go read this. If there's one thing you take away from my talk, it's go read the Hacker School social rules. One of the social rules so Hacker School is a writing retreat for programmers in New York City, and they have this set of social rules that are a shorthand for people to be able to say, hey, that thing you just did was hurtful to me. And I think the most important of the social rules is the idea of feigned surprise, at least in this context. They're all pretty important. Feigned surprise is that, oh, what, you didn't know what a cross-site scripting bug was? Like that, oh, you didn't know blah. It's an incredibly toxic way of communicating when somebody is expressing vulnerability in saying, I don't know. So being able to recognize when you are doing the feigned surprise thing is super important, and I think it's something that a lot of security people could stand to learn. So if you see your security team or you're on the security team and you see yourself doing this, it's definitely it's definitely worthwhile to say, hey, let's make sure that we don't sort of do this to developers who are trying to do the right thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about secure development processes. Working at Microsoft, Microsoft are sort of the pioneers of doing a security development lifecycle, having a secure development process, and a number of companies adopted processes based on the one that Microsoft built over the last 12 years, I think it was, since the Trustworthy Computing memo. When I look at the Microsoft SDL, and having worked with it for a couple of years when I was there, the thing that pops out at me is it's very waterfall. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's a waterfall process. There is an agile version of the SDL, but it is designed around 6-week sprints leading up to a annual or every 3 years kind of release cycle on a big product. Being able to do the work embodied in the SDL is not practical when you're in a continuous delivery kind of environment. There's a lot of lessons that can be learned from the Microsoft SDL and taken over to a continuous delivery environment, doing things at a particular cadence, integrating tooling into your development process. But the idea of doing it as like you have to do this before you ship anything is not practical today. So I wasn't unfortunately able to release Heroku's entire SDL, but that is coming down the pipes. But I wanted to give you 3 bullet points on the minimum viable SDL. Who here is part of an organization that has a formal secure development process? 1, 2, 3. That's about what I was expecting. So if you don't have a formal secure development process, if you do these 3 things, it will dramatically increase the security posture of your code. A self-assessment to determine if it's a high-risk project. Things like what's the potential for data spillage, what's the executive importance of the project, and does it touch customer data? These are all critical things that say, hey, we better raise the red flag. This is something that the security team needs to have a look at. Or the development team, provided with a checklist, will be able to do a self-assessment on this. Doing threat modeling. Threat modeling doesn't need to be this big formal exercise. The fundamentals of threat modeling are you draw a data flow diagram, enumerating all of the assets and data flows in your piece of code, and then you run a threat assessment on each flow of data to say, is this vulnerable to things? Like, am I running TLS on this? Is it, are there native code parsers accepting data from end users, that kind of thing. And then having a security review checklist that's suited to your environment that a developer who's doing a self-assessment or the security team as part of their own assessment can complete on an ongoing basis. And then some extra credit. This has been one of the big frustrations in my life over the past 6 months, is that there are not a lot of really good security static analysis tools that integrate into things like GitHub. So if anybody wants to get on that would be super awesome. I would love to give you money. So one of the other things that we've done at Heroku over the last 6 months is we started up a bug bounty program. And bug bounties are near and dear to my heart, having worked in the Security Response Center at Microsoft, answered emails from security researchers all around the world who are reporting security bugs. At Heroku, we've had bugs reported to us from, I think, 12 different countries just over the last 6 months, and previously from all over the world as well. We pay out so the idea of a security bug bounty is you pay a small amount of money to researchers who report bugs to you. You can vary the amount of money based on the severity of the bug that's getting reported to you. If it's like a Postgres vulnerability, you'd probably pay quite a bit of money for it. But if it was like a random cross-site scripting in a marketing site, probably only get $100 for that, or like a security misconfiguration on an email server, that kind of thing. There's a bunch of different commercial companies that will run your bug bounty program for you. We use BugCrowd, but there's also Synack and HackerOne are two of the other big ones. Or you can roll your own, like companies like GitHub, Facebook, Google, and other major companies have set up their own bug bounty program. And I wanted to share a couple of the lessons that I've learned in running a bug bounty program, but also in like being a security researcher. Some of the stuff that can go wrong in a bug bounty program, the thing that makes it difficult is you have a lot of work in progress, a lot of balls in the air that have both external inputs and external dependencies, and internal inputs and internal dependencies. So you have security researchers who are saying, hey, has my bug been fixed yet? Has my bug been fixed yet? Has my bug been fixed yet? And you have internal people who are like, well, I've got this other like pry1 thing, and this is just a cross-site scripting bug. So you're trying to like weigh the fact that it's an externally reported bug with the fact that they've got a lot of other stuff to do as well. Coming back again to that idea of emotional labor as like having to sort of manage your feelings and anxiety around the fact that you've got these external people who know security things about your platform, about your software, and you're relying on their goodwill to not just like drop 0 day on you, post that security bug to a public mailing list or whatever. So in negotiating the severity with external people, but also in having those negotiations internally as well. And one of the like frequent things that people will experience in starting up a new bug bounty is that they'll initially get this absolute crap flood of really low severity bugs that are just like all of the little security stuff you never noticed. You haven't turned on HSTS on TLS. You haven't filtered input, again, on that like one marketing site that was set up 2 years ago, that kind of thing. So you get this big flood of stuff initially. I made another checklist. The big one is communicating the importance of prioritizing externally reported bugs internally to your organization, saying, hey, everybody, we're going to get this flood of kind of unimportant bugs. Some of them are going to be good bugs, but some of them are going to be those little tiny misconfigurations. A lot of them are going to be like an hour or two of work to fix. We need to get this rush out, and then it'll taper off from there. And one of the big ones that we've sort of struggled with and iterated on over the past few months has been having focused time to work on this work. We found that having 2 people is way better than 1 person because you can have somebody to bounce, hey, so we had this report, and I don't think it's that important, but what do you think about this? Are you able to reproduce it? So just having 2 people to sort of gut check each other when dealing with these externally reported bugs is really important. And also being able to run your communications by a second person. When you're dealing with external people, there's always the chance that the communications that you have with the researcher, they're going to post them to their blog or whatever. So you want to make sure that you're being professional and friendly in all of these things. Again, that whole emotional labor thing. And then being able to take those bugs that you're getting externally and say, hey, is this a gap in my process that I need to add to my security review checklist, and iterate on that. So I'm a really big fan of security through play, playing Capture the Flag with your engineering team. Has anyone in the room played Capture the Flag? It's like hacker war games kind of thing. Stripe runs one as like a recruiting tool. There's a bunch of sort of online ones that are run throughout the year. If you have a chance, there's one coming up, not this weekend, but next weekend that's run, 2 weekends from now, that's run out of NYU Polytechnic. They do this Computer Security Awareness Week thing, and it's open to everybody. They have like a student category where they have prizes and stuff, but there's also just I work in the industry, or not even, category that you can just go and sign up for and play. You download these challenges, or you have to hack into the servers that they provide, that kind of thing. And it's just a fabulous learning resource and team building activity. So if you ever have the chance to go out and play Capture the Flag with your colleagues, it's really, really fun. I gave a talk on it at Security B-Sides Toronto a couple of years ago, last fall, not more than that. And there's a deck on like how to play that, so if you're interested at all. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate your time. And